Our moderator for this session is Francisco Cordova. He is the Chief Operating Officer of the ISS National Lab. He's an aerospace executive leading diverse teams to shape the future of research in space, but also to partner with a variety of providers to continue the advancement of the low Earth orbit economy. And he'll guide this panel discussion on policy objectives and supporting activities. So please join me in welcoming Francisco Cordova and his panelists to the stage.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raven. I appreciate that introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, excellent. Well, welcome to our first afternoon panel session today at ISSRDC. I'll start by introducing this fantastic panel that we have here on stage. First, I'd like to welcome back to our stage Dr. Ezine Uzo-Okoro. Ezine is the Assistant Director for Space Policy at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, with almost 2 decades of government experience in both NASA mission and policy. So welcome back, Ezine.
Thank you.
We also have here, as part of the panel, Dr. Robin Gatton. Robin is the Director of the International Space Station at NASA. She leads strategy, policy, integration, and stakeholder engagement for the space station program at the agency level. She provides technical advice for the program, as well as oversees program execution and risk management. Robin is engaged in NASA strategic planning to leverage the space station to enable a robust low Earth orbit economy. She has 35 years of experience at NASA in both the space station program and in development and management of the life support systems for human spaceflight missions. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
And finally, we also have Dr. Ronald Joslin. He has been the program director of the Fluid Dynamics program at the National Science Foundation since 2016. He has supported a multitude of research projects, including a joint NSF and Air Force effort in hypersonic transition and turbulent flows, NSF and CASIS experiments on the ISS. Under 14 NSF and CASIS joint solicitations, 49 projects have been co-funded and scheduled for testing on the ISS. In 2020, he was appointed to the Science Subcommittee of the ISS National Lab User Advisory Committee to support and advise CASIS. And prior to NSF, Ron was a program officer at the Office of Naval Research and was Navy principal responsible for high-performance supercomputing resources across all Navy laboratories and programs. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks.
So we'll start with a little bit of a brief introduction and background from the team. So, Ezine, would you like to say some words about the panel?
Yes, thank you. First of all, this is a wonderful opportunity, so many thanks to the ISS National Lab to be here to discuss White House policy, particularly from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So before I delve into our policy, well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is that our overarching purpose is to strengthen, advance, and use science and technology to inspire and to meet our nation's greatest aspirations. And with that, it's my pleasure to be here with you all today to discuss a critical and timely policy that we had been working on for about 12 months, and that culminated in the release of what we call the National Low Earth Orbit Research and Development Strategy. And this is an important activity because even though we are moving forward with lunar explorations and lunar programs, our work in LEO is continuing. Our work in LEO is still very important and is something that we continue to take seriously, particularly the future development and use of low Earth orbit for research, for microgravity, for a plethora of science applications. And some of these applications involve future human and robotic space activities. It involves prioritizing the advancement of science to benefit us here on Earth. It also involves ensuring that there is no gap between the retirement of the International Space Station by 2030 to a commercial LEO destination platform. And it also serves as an opportunity for us to leverage our leadership role in space in low Earth orbit and ensure that we continue to be the partner of choice amongst our allies and partners. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Esene. Robin.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco. So last year at this time, we were just starting to think about how this incredible R&D momentum that we've created through the International Space Station, how we would keep that going through the decade and beyond to these future commercial LEO platforms, and how we would involve all of government, not just NASA, in that future. So at the end of this conference last year, we had a workshop hosted by Esene and her team at the White House, where we just started that conversation among our community and some of the stakeholders. And that led to the establishment of an interagency working group that I had the honor of co-chairing along with Ron and led by Esene. So we've had a really fun year. We've been off to the races. Esene really drove us hard to develop this strategy and release it earlier this year. And NASA was really honored to play a critical role in the strategy. We also, as part of this effort, OSTP put out an RFI, request for information, at the end of the year, and one of the questions that was asked in that RFI was, does the community support the idea of continuing a national lab beyond ISS in this future where we have commercial LEO destinations? And overwhelmingly the response was yes. So we've been doing a lot of planning around that idea. What does that future look like? What do those models look like when the government no longer owns the platform, but commercial industry owns the platform? So we've been doing a lot of that strategic planning. How do we keep this work going? The momentum created by the National Lab. How do we provide continuity for our research community, because that's critically important through this transition? So we're really in the middle of that planning. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but we're doing a lot of listening right now, including at this conference. So we are wanting to hear your thoughts and your inputs as the user community and as our commercial partners and as our government partners in how we create this future. So we want to get all we can out of this incredible space station platform through the decade, and it's exciting to be here and see all the results that we're talking about from the research, but we also want you to know that we're working hard to plan for that future.
Thank you, Robin. Ron?
It's a pleasure to be here with you. What is NSF doing up here? So NSF sponsors the research, basically fundamental research on the ISS, to gain a better understanding of the physics and toward benefiting life on Earth, of course, right? That's a resonating theme that you've heard this morning. And also for future STEM workforce, that we fund students, K-12 projects, undergraduates, graduates to do research, and they get to interact with the astronauts and have a great ISS experience. And they ultimately, some of them, of course, are going to move on to LEO and other space-based activities, we hope, right? So it's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Thank you, Ron. I really appreciate those words. And so before we dig into some of the questions that we have for the panel, I would really like to remind the audience that you can submit questions through the ISSRDC app. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please make sure to go to the app, submit the question, and before the end of the panel, we'll select a few of those to answer. Okay. So let's just dive right in. Esene, first question I think would be, how does the national strategy for microgravity research and development play into national goals for future research, and how do American companies and researchers fit into achieving this next revolution?
So let's start with the national goals. What are they? Well, there were a number of challenges which we turned into opportunity that came up during the gathering of information, not just through the request for information that Robin mentioned, but also through a workshop that we held internally. And we saw an opportunity to strengthen science and technology to improve collaboration across government partners and to deepen international relationships and also to grow our STEM workforce. So the policy has these five goals. The first being promoting groundbreaking science and technology in LEO. The second being, and the reason Ron is here, improving coordination across the entire US government. Most people associate the International Space Station with NASA, but it's clear that obviously there are several agencies, departments and agencies that play a role in the research and development work that goes on low Earth orbit. And then when you think about market sustainability, market innovation, how do we ensure that we develop and support? What's the role of the government in doing that? And the fourth goal is around, again, our international cooperation. There are existing allies and partners who we've done a wonderful work with over, for over 20 years. We want to continue those. We want to remain the partner of choice with them as they move on to continue exploring and conducting scientific research in LEO. We also want to deepen and strengthen relationships with new spacefaring nations as well. And then in the area of STEM, how are we building capacity in the post-secondary levels? How are we growing our workforce and solving some of those challenges that exist today? So that's how we came up with these 5 national goals. And then when you talk about how the commercial sector fits in, then you look at our third goal. So we are working to ensure that we have market sustainability, that we are accelerating market innovation, and that takes a number of forms. And the reason that policy is usually written at a high level, at a very broad, accessible way, is it allows departments and agencies, it allows stakeholders across the board, including commercial companies, to then grab an oar and determine a vision that aligns with their priorities, determine a vision that aligns with not just what the government needs, but what these companies need to be successful. And there are, a lot of examples that we thought about and that we considered. Priorities like, assured and reliable and prioritized access to LEO. How do we ensure that we keep that going? How do we ensure that we keep human health for long duration space exploration? How do we ensure that all kinds of basic and applied research continues to occur as we transition to this system that will be owned by a non-governmental body? How do we clearly communicate what the government needs on these future platforms? So, those are examples of ways that the government can play a role in ensuring that the sector is set up for success, to ensure that we allow for innovation, we can meet the moment and communicate clearly, provide the support that we can, and watch these companies succeed.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. I think today the National Lab plays kind of a big part of that role, right, in being the enablers for industry to be able to access station in a unique and novel way that had never really been thought of before. And I think there's, as you mentioned, the policy definitely provides the opportunity for continuation of that, right, in future engagements. As you mentioned a little bit about STEM and workforce development. I know that that's a big priority. how do you see the national strategy stimulating STEM education and workforce development?
First, I have to mention that, STEM, particularly space STEM, is a top priority for the Vice President and her team. Vice President Harris has been a big champion and proponent. There's a space STEM task force that wrote a roadmap on ways we can close the gaps on the challenges that we had. So there's a lot of work going on in space STEM broadly. However, when you see STEM also mentioned in a lot of our policy documents, we're not doing it to check a box. We are trying to reach you all. We're trying to reach different constituents and stakeholders in different communities who may not be looking at the broader policy regarding STEM education. So for this small subdomain, particularly for microgravity research in this community, what are we looking to do? Well, we see two real opportunities. One is the government, the NASA internship program is legendary. NSF fellowships are legendary. I was an NSF fellow as an undergraduate. So continuing what the government does through providing opportunities for students to learn and continue to grow and continue to have that sense of wonder and excitement about the sector is important. But we also see a bigger opportunity for the commercial sector to work with academia, because there are just some gaps that the government can't fill, and that is an opportunity for students to get hands-on experience that they are not able to get in government, but get it on the job, and get also internship opportunities that really help to ensure that we keep that pathway populated and filled, and that pipeline filled with students who are ready to dive in and stay in the sector.
Yeah, that hands-on experience, that direct engagement with industry is really a ton of value. So I definitely agree. Thank you, Esene. Robin, what do you think is NASA's role in the national strategy for microgravity R&D?
Well, NASA was one of the big winners in the strategy. It speaks to my ability to not say no. NASA was named the lead agency for over half of the initiatives underneath those 5 goals that Esene described. And we're also the support agency for many of the others. So we have a big footprint and a major role in implementing the initiatives in the national strategy. So the ones that NASA's leading, I had to write them down because I couldn't memorize them. Conducting transformational R&D. So our biological and physical sciences community very much looking forward to results of the upcoming decadal survey and leading in that area of transformational R&D and partnering with other government agencies in that. Enabling rapid and repeatable experiments in space. You as the community out there are already thinking about this, and we're already innovating in this area on the International Space Station today. So how can we continue to grow those technologies and those innovations so that we really do have a laboratory in space that mimics the laboratory here on Earth, so we can conduct rapid and repeatable experiments and don't have to wait on the next launch every time. Encouraging new entrants into this community through the National Lab, and how do we expand that in the future into something we're calling the LEO National Lab. Promoting data sharing. Again, NASA's very committed to sharing data, open science from all of our work, so expanding that across the government and promoting data sharing with everyone. Supporting non-traditional use cases of human spaceflight. So what are those technologies? We're already demonstrating a lot of that through the National Lab today. Is how can we think about using space to solve problems that we hadn't previously thought about using space to solve? what are those terrestrial problems that could benefit from space, and vice versa? How can space benefit from problems being solved here on Earth? So what are those non-traditional use cases? Expanding international collaboration, as Azaneh described, is a very important policy of the U.S. government, and we have our international partners on the ISS National Lab. We're talking about expanding collaboration as we go forward into this future, beyond just our ISS international partners. And then finally, increasing opportunities from people from backgrounds underrepresented in STEM fields to engage in space R&D. And again, we're partnered today with the ISS National Lab, doing a lot of work in this area, looking at how do we expand opportunities for underrepresented groups to participate. So we're really excited about this work. We've already been engaged in this work, and we're looking at how we can increase further collaborations with our interagency partners to expand that work.
Thank you, Robin. Question, you mentioned, the collaborations through the National Lab a few times. As we look at a post-ISS world where we have multiple, hopefully, commercial LEO destinations, are there plans to continue a national laboratory that would support these different platforms?
Yes, definitely. So as I alluded, we asked that question. Overwhelming response was yes. You guys didn't give me the answer, though, on what that should look like in your responses, so we're trying to figure that out. Of course, the model will need to change, as I said, because the government's not going to own and operate the platform anymore. It's not our resource to give away. And we're going to be a customer of commercial platforms. So we're in the middle of developing that strategy, and it's kind of complex, lots of arms and legs to it that we're diving into. But some of the key assumptions, working assumptions that I can share with you today so far is that the LEO National Lab, and by the way, that's a working name. We're not set on that name. But that it will represent all government-sponsored research. So NASA, along with our other government agencies and that sponsored research, whether it be university PIs, government PIs, or commercial industry through programs like small business, innovative research. It will represent all of that. The idea is that it will be platform agnostic. So it's not a single place, it's not a single laboratory. It's going to be a combination of available commercial platforms that could include commercial LEO destinations, of course, permanent platforms, suborbital opportunities, we hope. So a range of capabilities that are being developed by commercial partners today. We hope to leverage all of those capabilities as the ecosystem matures. It will promote collaboration, for sure, both with our U.S. government and our international partners. So we're looking at ways that we already do that in other areas of research today. One really important tenet that we're looking at is that it needs to support but not compete with commercial platform and service providers. So it needs to be a complementary set of roles and supportive of that community and not take away from what that community wants to do for themselves. So we're looking at that. And then really important is that it's an evolution. We're not going to suddenly step change this whole community from one model to a completely different model, but we're hoping to evolve to that model through a stepwise transition. And that's really important because continuity is really important to this community. And we know you as users want a smooth transition. We know you want to be able to plan for that future and what that looks like and how your research is going to get to space. So we don't want to disrupt those plans. So it's really important that we plan for that stepwise transition. So we're looking at all these various different models and trying to find examples and pull goodness out of what's already out there. We know it's a little bit different though, just because it's space. So we're also thinking about future roles, who's going to manage this work, what is NASA going to do in the future, what do the commercial providers want to do, what would a third party managing this work do. So we've got a lot of work to go, and as I mentioned, having a lot of conversations, we're doing a lot of listening, but it's a really high priority for us, and in fact, we have an official action from the Space Council that from the meeting last September assigned to NASA to recommend a strategy, so we're working really hard on it.
That's great information. Thank you, Robin. Ron, so what is NSF's experience with doing research on the ISS? Can you talk to us a little bit about it? You know, we talked about the importance of having multiple government agencies be part of future LEO National Lab efforts across CLDs. What has been your experience from the NSF perspective on the ISS?
So NSF in cases formed a partnership in 2015. It's within the NSF Engineering Directorate only. And since then, we put out 14 solicitations, as you heard earlier, to provide an opportunity for the community to conduct research on the ISS in fluid dynamics, particulate multi-phase flow, so bubbles, particulates, interface, combustion and fire systems, thermal systems, nanoscale systems, tissue engineering, mechanobiology. And this model that Robin was just talking about has worked very well, not just for another agency, but for the principal investigators in terms of helping find implementation partners, helping with the process, especially new PIs. And since then, it's up to 51 projects that have been funded. About 10 or 12 have been up and back. And so we have some in the queue that will keep us going through 2030 for sure and beyond. And we're planning beyond as well. And that's about $41 million of research on the ISS. And that cost does not include you know, our NASA partner who handles ascent, descent, and the crew time. So I mean, that's a substantial investment and obviously greatly appreciated. So for the past 8 years then, this model's worked well and it's become very efficient. A lot of learning when you start up doing this, but it's become very efficient. So in the past 4 years, NASA's been a third partner on flow boiling and condensation research. So it's pretty easy for us to add agencies to this partnership in this kind of model. NSF has had other investments in LEO research as well. NSF, NASA, and a number of partners have conducted research and are conducting research in plasma physics research. And then the SBIR program. If you take the SBIR program in NSF, we're very active investors in small companies to create innovation in space. A couple of examples are robotics and 3D printing and remote sensing, navigation. It goes across the gamut. But if you're in the audience and you're a small company that might be interested, just look at NSF SBIR space technology, and it'll come up with a point of contact that you can contact and tell her your ideas, and hopefully join the program. So that's all I have.
Oh, thanks, Ron. And you know, I think you know, when you look at OGA, right, or government agency participation on the ISS, you know, we definitely have NASA kind of as our main sponsor. We have NSF that has had programs with the National Lab for a long time. We've had NIH participating as well in programs in the past and in the future. We've had agencies like DOD and DARPA and DOE National Labs that have also participated. And so I think there's a really good core group of agencies that have dipped their toe in the water of what's in the art of the possible in the National Lab. Ron, in your experience, what do you think are some of those research areas that are prime for interagency collaboration?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that NSF is, got a history of partnering with other agencies, with international agencies as well, as does NASA and other agencies. They have these history, and we can work well together. So it's a very doable thing. What has been really valuable in this developing the national strategy is that these agencies have come together and started to build relationships just through this last year. So that's a very strong thing that's come out of this process. And now we really understand, that there's objectives behind these priorities. So we see as agencies how we fit into helping meet these objectives. So for agencies that haven't conducted LEO research, and there are some, there is a challenge, right? The agency leadership typically asks 2 questions. And the first question is, how much does it cost, right? And how much does it cost today, and how much is it going to cost in the future? And then the second question that's typically asked is, what is the ROI? What is the return on investment? How is this investment going to help meet my agency's mission? And so those are really 2 difficult questions to answer, but I think we have a way forward for other agencies to join and actually sponsor, co-sponsor, or just actually conduct research on the LEO environment today and tomorrow. So, and it's really not practical with the OSTP level to develop implementation plans. But I think we have a way forward, and it's called a very familiar term, birds of a feather. I think we have a way forward that agencies with similar interests are going to get together and talk about execution plans. And I think that's coming very shortly. But in terms of the research areas, these are 6 that I put down. Obviously, there are more. But at K-12 education, college and post-college, right? That's fellowships, that's projects for students, which Azanea has already talked about. Human systems, biological tissue, bioengineering, agriculture is added as well. And you heard some of that this morning, and that's going to continue. Physical sciences, transport phenomena, thermal and combustion, we've been doing that for years, and I think that's still a very fruitful area to consider. Commercial, basic, and applied research, that's where SBIR fits in, and of course applied research as well. Advanced manufacturing, R&D in space, and the final one was advanced materials in extreme environments. And of course, you can add yours to this as well. This is not trying to exclude anyone. But the ISS National Lab is already working in these areas. So they're gonna play a pivotal role, I think, in the conversation that the agencies are gonna have as they discuss how to develop execution plans and create solicitations and opportunities for the community. So I think that's all coming this next year. And I think hopefully next year at this time at the conference, some of that conversation, some of those outcomes will be presented.
Absolutely, thank you, Ron. Again, we're happy to help, and hopefully, next year we have 6 more chairs down that way, right? And so from different government agencies talking about their experience. So I think we may have a few minutes for questions and answers, so I'll pass it on to Christy Cox. Christy, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have quite a few questions. First one that has a lot of interest. What would be the impact if there is a gap between ISS decommissioning before the commercial LEO destinations or these commercial space stations come online? So what would that impact be for NSF, NASA, and other government users?
I can, I'll start, but I'd love to hear Ron's thoughts and Azanea's as well from a policy perspective. So we are planning, first and foremost, to not have a gap, as I described. We want an overlap, actually, between operating the space station fully, as you heard Dana Weigel describe, full utilization through 2030, while we start to transition work over to commercial LEO destinations. The reason this is so important is because we do believe that the impact of a gap will be disruptive. You all know, if you you don't have a place to continue your research and you're going to have to wait, how disruptive that's going to be to your plans. It's also disruptive to our commercial providers, our crew and cargo transportation providers. They need a destination to go to. And so if we don't have a destination, that's going to be disruptive to that community. We actually are concerned about that, and that's why it has been our planning and our policy to continue this transition without a gap. Ron, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, so the way CASIS and NSF puts out opportunities, it's typically, well, it started out as 3-year projects. So a 3-year project would entail ground-based experiments. The students, of course, have to get involved. And then setting out, what the plan looks like once you get to the ISS to duplicate those experiments in space and then come back and analyze those results. And we found after the first year that was almost impossible. So we extended it and made it 4-year awards because we don't control schedule. And so if there's an issue with launch and getting your experiments up there, that's not the PI's fault, that's not the student's fault, and so we made it 4 years. So these projects that we're talking about, these 51 projects, 30-some that are still in the queue, they're going to be up and back before 2030 without a problem. And so if NSF would be impacted if there's a gap in the sense that we would stop solicitations, or we would have to come up with a plan working, with our partners to see how that would work. Yeah. So we could make it work if we have to stop. If there is a gap, that's not going to be that's not the plan. But if there is a gap, we would have to stop the opportunity and then restart the opportunity once we resolve that issue.
If I may add, I just want to step back a bit and remind everyone that the reason we, at the White House level, released policy on this topic this year is to prepare 7 years in advance so that we do not have to plan for a scenario where there's a gap. A lot of you in this room probably remember the shuttle era. Something similar was done, where there were plans in place and the public heard about the retirement of the shuttle and thought, NASA's just retiring the shuttle, the entire agency is shutting down. And I've actually been foot stomping this to the press so that we don't see the headlines in 7 years that there is no plan in place, because Robin's team, Ron's team, and the entire interagency has been working really hard. Interagencies are a word for the entire U.S. government with equities on this topic, have been working hard, particularly NASA, to not just plan for the transition, but also to ensure that their budget lines and through the CLIPS programs and others are supportive of this transition. And we are not planning for what happens without a gap or during a gap, because we just believe that the steps we're taking today will really put us in a good place so that we have, hopefully, the goal is actually more than one option. Because if you think about not just your research, but all the stakeholders, our international stakeholders, our domestic stakeholders, our academic stakeholders, or private, all the stakeholders that Robin mentioned, it just really would be disruptive, and that's why we're doing the work now to prepare for as smooth of a transition as possible.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Is there any particular yet unseen achievement or accomplishment you would like to see come to fruition before the ISS end operations that will serve as a profound catalyst of continuity for future commercial stations that come online?
Oh, wow. So there's so many to choose from. I have there's so much exciting research going on right now that I can't wait to see the results from. I think you all heard this morning the medical research and the new Igniting Innovation solicitation around that. Dare we hope to say one day that we cured cancer through research on the International Space Station? I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I think we can already say that lives are being saved today that would not have been saved before if it were not for the research being done on station. I'm also excited about the new products being developed and would love to see a future where those take off to full production in space. I think that would be fantastic, and we're doing what we can to enable that with the space station today. I'm also excited about, the future that the space station's inspiring future generations to pursue these fields, the next generation of you guys, space researchers. And then the international partnerships. We just keep coloring in the map of countries that have participated on the International Space Station in one form or fashion. So coloring the whole map, would be a fantastic goal.
All right. What do you see as the role of the United States in a future competitive commercial spaceflight environment?
We want to be the partner of choice. We want our international partners to come along with us and conduct research on our privately owned space stations, on our privately owned infrastructure in low Earth orbit. We understand that there might be a few other options, but we want to continue to be a nation that is leading in the advancement of science and technology writ large, not just in low Earth orbit, as we're speaking about cancer applications, but across a number of domains. And we believe that we will continue to work hard to ensure that we retain our role as a global leader in that space, and we're bringing a private sector along with us.
Yeah, I don't think it's I agree with you 100%. I think it's about continuing that leadership, right? I mean, we're changing the ownership of the platform to really just find a way to enable more commercial growth in the economy in LEO. But the focus and the priority of being leaders in space needs to be there, absolutely.
And I would add to it, we're just solving the world's biggest problems, right? The U.S. government has an incredible opportunity to use space and these platforms to solve those problems that are a priority across the globe.
Thank you.
All right. Robin, I think you'll like this one. Does NASA plan to be able to do system-scale technology demonstrations, such as carbon dioxide scrubbing, in the age of commercial LEO destinations?
Near and dear to my heart. I grew up working life support systems, if you don't know that in my background, so I love a good ECLIS question. We are working really hard to evolve our life support systems today on the International Space Station into the system that we need to take us beyond LEO to the Moon and Mars. And we're working really hard to evolve that system and then get the time on it to understand it and to improve the reliability and make sure we can count on that system. So we've been looking at, do we take that entire life support system and put it on a commercial LEO destination? That's a lot. But we are working closely with our commercial destination providers to see what technologies they might want to incorporate into their baseline system. And there's a good intersection of capabilities that NASA's developed that they are incorporating into their system. But we will also have one of our future needs that we'll be a customer for on these space stations is technology development. So we do anticipate continuing to do things like life support systems or other pieces of technology we want to test using those resources on commercial platforms. I strongly believe that we will not implement a new technology for the first time on a Mars mission without first having tested it in low Earth orbit.
And just to step back for a bit, the International Space Station is this beacon of international cooperation and scientific achievement, and it wasn't built even in a decade. We kept adding more systems and growing the station as time went on. So it's already a tall order for one or two commercial entities to continue to replicate all of the activities that go on the International Space Station today. So, and again, Robin and her team are working really hard to ensure that we have the ability to transition as much of that as possible. But it's an exciting time. We need your support and your assistance and your ideas. And we are, here to really champion our commercial partners that are doing the hard work too of building the next generation of stations.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Christy, I think maybe we have time for one more. Yeah.
Okay. This one's for Ron. What is the current NSF thinking on how it intends to interact with CLDs to continue fundamental science research in low Earth orbit?
I think that's a plan in the works that'll bear out, as Robin was just talking about the next model, right? What that model looks like. I think I don't know how to keep it any shorter than that. The model that we have works very well. Again, for the principal investigators, for implementation partners, for federal agencies. How that's going to bear out with one or more commercial is really TBD. But we're planning to go forward and do it. So that's why the gap is important, to not have a gap. There's other reasons as well that we really won't talk about those. But
awesome. Thank you, Ron. Well, thank you to the audience for those fantastic questions. And thank you to our panelists here today. A round of applause for them, please.